Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. Before we kick off this week's episode, just a quick ask. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to make sure that you never miss an episode, never miss out on any of the strategies and tactics that we're sharing to help you continue charting your own path to freedom. And if you'd like to go deeper with any of this, we've launched a free Facebook group, which you can join at pathtofreedom.com/group. And we've linked that in the show notes to make it easy for you to find. All right. Thank you again for being here. Let's drop in to the episode. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to the Path to Freedom podcast. Today, I'm joined by Doug Smith, who's the Senior Vice President of Franchise Development for the Belfor Franchise Group. Doug, welcome to the show.
Oh, I appreciate you having me, Wes. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it as well. So you guys are one of the more interesting, kind of family of franchise brands out there to me. And I've been in franchising for coming up on 10 years now. And so, you see quite a few of these kind of aggregators of franchise companies out there. But, from my perspective, the way you guys are doing it, the types of brands that are under the Belfor Franchise Group umbrella, there's a lot more synergy than what you see in some of these other aggregators. So I'll let you kind of introduce yourself and maybe give an overview of what Belfor is and the types of companies that you have for the listeners that aren't aware. But I just wanted to kind of start it on that note for the listeners because I find it particularly interesting the way you guys have scaled this out.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. For those not super familiar with the Belfor Franchise Group, we are a franchise group with 15 home service brands. We do kind of stay in that place. We're not adding cookie franchises or things of that nature, or big retails or anything like that. Those are all great. It's just not our wheelhouse, right?
Right. Yeah.
Home service space. So, yeah, it's been I won't go too far down the rabbit hole because it's been a long and winding road to get to where we are today. But one of the different, you mentioned there's a lot of big aggregators out there, a lot of consolidation going on, even in the home service spaces, right?
Yeah.
With a lot of great companies. The thing that probably makes Belfor Franchise Group a little bit different, that most of those companies, as they start to aggregate, and if you pay attention to the business, right, there's a lot of private equity involved. So they're kind of coming in and they're buying, a small group of brands and then going and kind of tacking them on. And, private equity world's great, does a lot of great things, but, they're just on one track, right? They're going to go, grow it, add brands, and probably exit at some point to another equity group. And, the story kind of goes on and on. And that's great. That's just not who we are. So we're owned by an actual operating company, Belfor Property Restoration, which is the world's largest property restoration company. We've got 12,000 employees around the globe doing work in 40 to 50 countries. So it's and just in the U.S. alone, we have 150 offices for Belfor Property Restoration. Those are all corporately owned by our CEO and founder, Sheldon Yellen. And all those offices almost act like a franchise, right? Every office has a general manager. But those are where our employees reside, and we're dealing with the same types of issues on a day-to-day basis as our franchisees are, right? They've got locations, they've got a sales team, they've got a marketing team. They're trying to earn, that restoration business. They're working with national accounts. So being an operating company and owned by an operating company, I think really gives us a lot of expertise, a lot of resources, and a lot of experience in what a franchise would go through. So
that's such a key point because, nothing wrong with the private equity model, like you said, but I find, my wife and I own a franchise that's part of one of these big aggregators of home service brands. And then there's another layer where private equity owns them. And there's just, from my experience, there's a lot of disconnect between the top of that food chain and, the franchisees in their local markets. And, we see this all the time where, people much higher up in the organization sit around, they have all these ideas that, if you're sitting in a boardroom, probably make all the sense in the world. But when it comes to how to actually roll these things out and implement and execute, in a local market, that's a totally different thing. And because they don't have any of that kind of boots on the ground experience, I've just seen a lot of these vision and strategy never really come to fruition. So I'm glad you pointed that out. I think it makes a bigger difference than a lot of people may realize.
We're biased to ourselves, obviously, but we think it does
Yeah.
make a difference. And we feel, even each of our brands has a set of business coaches, right? Like most franchises do. But
Yeah.
we really want, and some do this, some don't. But we spend a lot of time in the field. We want our coaches out on the ground. We want them, visiting the franchisees, going over their books, looking at their marketing plans, just stepping back and looking what a day in the life looks like, right? And they travel around, they work with them, and it's their job to help make the franchisees, successful.
Yeah.
And a lot of that comes from, being owned again by Belfor. The other part of being owned by Belfor is you kind of touched on the way we put our businesses together. So not only are we have home services, most of those brands have synergies not only with each other, but with the mothership, if you will, with Belfor Property Restoration. That's kind of what started the company and got us down the path. Our very first franchise was Ducks, the duck cleaning franchise. And that came about because we were servicing a large loss and, working on a hotel, that had fires and so, within the hotel, and all the HVAC systems and the ductwork had to be cleaned. And we were working with an outsourced company. And our owner started thinking, well, I really like what they do, and they're a necessary part of what we have to do for remediation. Maybe we should think about, buying them, and that kind of led to that. And a lot of that thinking goes into the companies that we buy, which is great, because Redbox plus dumpsters, we bought them back in 2021. You know what? We spend tens of millions of dollars in the U.S. alone just on dumpsters every year. Well, if we can funnel some of that, a lot of that, to our franchisees, well, that's just that's just gravy, right, on top of it.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to bring that exact example up because I don't remember the specific numbers, but when that acquisition happened, I remember hearing, just some of the numbers that across all of Belfor's companies, how much they were spending in a year on roll-off dumpsters. And it was like, well, it's brilliant on one hand and kind of a no-brainer on the other hand.
And we tell our franchisees, you know what, Belfor's there. We will set up an introduction to the local general manager in your area, right? You go in, you go take them to lunch, what have you. But the one thing we do through all of our brands is we still tell our franchisees, you still need to earn the business. We're not just going to hand it to you. Belfor prides itself on customer service. We are big across all of our brands and the mothership. Customer service is of the utmost of a priority for us. So we will help facilitate that referral. But we tell all our franchisees, you're not just going to get it because you're one of our franchisees. You're still going to have to go in and be competitive and pick up the phone when they call, and make sure you're there and you're developing a relationship. That's still part of your core business, and we want you executing on that, right? Even when it's kind of an internal referral. So
yeah, well, that makes sense. I mean, you want to, as a franchisor, I don't think you ever, if you can avoid it, want to mandate to your franchisees, hey, this is who you absolutely have to use for these different services. And it does, it keeps the integrity up, right? And it ensures that you're going to put your best foot forward, and you just don't expect that, hey, this business is going to fall into my lap because, this is one of our sister companies, or we have shared ownership with these companies. But, maybe quickly, because a lot of the people listening, may have some familiarity with the restoration industry in general, but probably don't understand the full extent of just everything that goes into the various aspects of restoration. Like, the duct cleaning that you just mentioned is a great example of that. But just kind of quickly run us through on the franchise side of the business, the different industries that you guys are in. If you want to quickly list each franchise brand, that's great. We're not going to have time to get into each brand specifically today, but I think a lot of the listeners will kind of be shocked at how many different angles there are to this restoration industry.
Yeah, for those who aren't even familiar with what we're talking about, right? A large, restoration general, you've all probably dealt with it out there, right? You're talking about water damage, fire and smoke damage, mold, things like that. So, and that could be just like we saw down in Florida and North Carolina recently. That could be large catastrophe type events. Or it can be, your toilet overflowed, or your kids, let the bathtub overflow, right? It's every day. The ice maker in the refrigerator line came loose, and it's been leaking slowly in the refrigerator and hurting ruining your wood floor. So, restoration can be any of that, right? From the smallest of things all the way up to, large hurricanes and complete losses. So, and I'm sure most people have dealt with something on some scale and understand that business. But yes, there's a lot of ancillary stuff you don't think about. So kind of going through some of our brands, we do have a franchise restoration brand as well, 1-800-water damage, kind of self-explanatory there.
Yeah.
Some might ask, well, wait, you're owned by Belfor that does property restoration and you have a franchise. How does that work? And I won't get too busy, but they actually play very well together because our parent company, Belfor, they'll do any type of job, but overall, the focus is probably more, they're going in like recently with those hurricanes, right? And they're doing large industrial complexes, municipalities, colleges, hospitals, school systems, right? That's their kind of first, swipe at the recovery and the remediation. And a lot of our 1-800-water damages will do, maybe more, some commercial, but more residential.
Yeah. A little smaller scale jobs.
Yeah. And they will go in behind those, even on catastrophe, we'll bring them in. And because we just need all hands on deck when their things are that bad. So we have that franchise, but we have another franchise, which is contents restoration. What's contents restoration? Well, Blue Kangaroo Packouts. That's our brand. It's kind of a niche space, right? Think about, you have a flood at your house and you have 2 feet of water and it recedes and we have to come in, 1-800-water damage, and we need to repair your house. I mean, cutting out sheetrock and cleaning up mold and treating it and new wood floors, whatever that is. Well, when we first get there, everything's in the way. What's contents? Well, if you can take your house and pick it up and flip it upside down, shake it, everything that falls out, that's contents, right?
Yeah.
And we can't do our job from a remediation standpoint until all that's been removed. So our niche Blue Kangaroo Packouts, they'll come in, like a referral from a 1-800-water damage or Belfor, and they'll come in and they'll pack out that house. And depending on the severity of the loss, a lot of that stuff might be able to be saved. So they'll take it back to their warehouse. They'll refurbish and renew everything they can. Then they'll pack it, inventory it, put it on the shelf, store it until it's time to come back to that house, warehouse, school, whatever it is, and put everything back. Oh, wait, half the stuff can't be saved. It's a complete mess. It was a fire. Oh, well, guess what? Let's call our Redbox Plus Dumpsters franchise and put that on property too, because all that stuff's going to go to the dumpster instead of the Blue Kangaroo Packouts.
That's right.
And then that'll stay there during the construction, reconstruction of the house or the business, what have you, as they go through it. It was a fire. I mentioned that earlier. Our ducts, they are HVAC, cleaning, duct cleaning, dryer vent cleaning, those types of things. So they're going to come in. If you have a fire, flood, you want to make sure there's no mold, there's no smoke, there's no soot. So they're going to come in behind that, right, and do that type of cleaning. So we have chem dry carpet cleaning. Maybe it's a small loss with just an overflowed tub. You don't need a restoration, but you can get chem dry carpet cleaning to come in and suck out what little water you have, clean the carpets, treat it, deodorize it. So there's so many enhanced wood renewals, another franchise of ours, that can redo your kitchen cabinets. Maybe they got, wet. So many of our brands are brought on because of those synergies I mentioned, and there's a lot of, referral opportunity there for our franchisees. Our most recent purchase, Junko Plus. It's junk removal and light demolition. What's light demolition? Well, we're not dropping casinos in Vegas, but think in your market, you may work with some of these other franchisees to do some of that removal, or you go in and think about, taking down old swimming pools or beat up sheds or detached garages, mobile homes, think of that type of stuff.
And then hauling it all away.
So, they all work together. And then during all these events, you've probably seen mobile storage before, right? Out there's, a handful of companies that do that mobile storage where you see a kind of a container sitting on somebody's property. One of our other newer brands, Cool Bins. Those are climate controlled portable storage units. So you have some of these events. Maybe it doesn't have to be hauled off and restored, but it has to be removed from the house as you're doing all this work. A lot of sheetrock work to get done, right? And you don't want to ruin it. So we've got climate controlled storage that we can put on site and move all your belongings into and keep them safe from the humidity and the bugs and the weather, things like that. So many of our brands just kind of work naturally together. And we think about that when we're either developing or purchasing, new inventory.
Yeah, there's a ton of synergy. And that's why I kind of let off with that. Because, again, with some of these other aggregators, and there's some great ones out there. But again, this is where that operational experience from the top down, I think, is so important, because I've seen and like personally seen examples where, there's this push to get franchisees in local markets to collaborate with each other and to refer business to each other, when they're all under the same umbrella. And I've not personally ever seen that executed all that well, unless, the franchisees in that local market are just really determined themselves to make it happen, and are willing to, kind of go the extra mile to develop those relationships. So, like I said, from my perspective, from the outside looking in, you guys are just doing it differently, and there is so much synergy. It just, it makes a lot of sense, and is pretty cool to see, honestly. So, with all these different angles to restoration, all these different franchise brands that you guys have, different kind of business models come with that, right? Like owning a Redbox Plus or a Cool Bins is going to be a little bit different than, owning an Enhance, wood treatment or a Chem Dry. So how would someone go about determining, if this is interesting to them, how would they go about determining, okay, I like what I'm hearing about Belfor and how they're doing things, but which of these franchises might be the best fit for me? I mean, the investment range is going to be different depending on the brand that you're looking at. What are your thoughts on that piece of it? We'll get right back to the episode, but I wanted to quickly share a free resource with you. If you're curious about franchise ownership and want to learn more about how countless people, including myself, have leveraged franchising as a way to create more freedom for themselves and to take control of their livelihood, I've put together an ebook. It's called Franchise Wealth Creation, and it's the perfect starting point for anyone that's just curious to learn more about this whole franchise thing and how I've helped hundreds of other people navigate all the steps involved in understanding and researching franchising. So click the link in the show notes, fill out a short form. I'll send you the ebook. I think it's a great starting point if you're curious at all about learning more about franchising. All right, let's get back to the episode.
We do. And then that's another thing I like about our portfolio, if you will, right? You mentioned the investment ranges. There's of course different niches with each one, but you've got probably on the really economical side, like a Patch Boys franchise, which you can get into, for 40, 50 grand all in, right? You can get into it. Not a lot of inventory, or tools, or even, so it's relatively affordable and up and running really quickly, and then you've got, like you mentioned, Cool Bins and Redbox Plus dumpsters. Well, your investment level is going to be in that, call it 700,000 to 1.2 million ish, right? So, and then all the rest are
trucks, inventory of the containers. It's a heavier lift, but different type of business, different type of opportunity too.
Yeah, and people have a lot of reasons for getting into business, right? Those last two we mentioned are really asset heavy, right? So some people like that, right? From a tax and depreciation standpoint, they want a good earning business, but they're really concerned about the tax, depreciation, things like that. So they like that type of business. Others may not. They don't want to deal with that investment level, or both of those come with trucks, right? Big old trucks, your roll off trucks and trucks hauling the portable storage units. Anybody's ever been in that space or any space that has a relatively big truck or a CDL, type of truck. you're gonna have right issues. You're gonna have that. There's a lot of maintenance on them. You're gonna have them break down from time to time. You're gonna have to come up with alternate ways to do your business while that happens. So there's everything has certain headaches you're gonna have to deal with as part of a normal day. But some people just like that stuff. And it also depends. Do you want to be an owner or operator? Do you want to be partially removed and like absenteeism? That can be part of the plan and how you view that too. Labor, how much you want to deal with labor. Our Redbox are cool. You don't need a lot of labor. You need a driver and maybe a general manager / sales guy type of thing. If you got a 1-800 water damage, you're going to need more staff because you're out on site with labor, working in the homes, doing the remediation. So, there's different levels of labor too, and how many people you want to recruit and manage and things of that way. So there's all kinds of reasons that you might, kind of gravitate towards
one over the other. Yeah, it's all important. I mean, these are all the things that as I'm working with someone, before we even start talking specific brands, we're talking through these different things to figure out, what might resonate with them, what might not resonate. And, look, there's very much such a thing as, some business opportunities that are probably going to be better for that first time business owner. Especially if it's someone that's maybe earlier in their career and they just haven't had as long to build up their assets and their net worths, and something like a Cool Bins or a Redbox Plus may not be within reach from them yet from a financial standpoint, but something like a Patch Boys where they can get it up and running quickly. It's very lean. You don't have a lot of overhead. If they're willing to be more of that owner operator, like I tell people this all the time. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with, getting into a business that, maybe it's not the dream business that you would have imagined. And maybe it's not the business you want to own forever, but it's a stepping stone, right? And it gets you on that right track where, you're not working for someone else anymore. You're making more money than you were before, and you're learning and you're building confidence. And the types of doors that can open up going forward can be really, really interesting. So none of that to throw shade on Patch Boys. It's a really cool concept. And I'm not saying it's not, a great business, but like, I mean, I've seen that personally with my wife and I. Like, we got into a very low cost, low overhead home services franchise 7 years ago. Still own it. Been very successful with it. And we learned so much in doing that. We put ourselves in a situation where we had a lot more income than we had before, a lot more flexibility and autonomy. And then we got into a second franchise that was a lot more asset heavy with trucks and trailers and equipment and, more labor and a warehouse and inventory. And, that business had a much higher ceiling in terms of, just its overall potential. But looking back on it, I'm really glad that we did the lower cost, leaner, kind of less moving parts and pieces business first, because it prepared us to take on something that was a little more complex. And so I think that's interesting as you kind of look at your portfolio. There's almost something for any type of aspiring business owner or even an experienced business owner that's more of that investor kind of mindset at this point.
Yeah, we always say we've got a little something for everybody. I mean, not just from price point, like you said, from complexity and labor requirements and investment levels. So I think there's something for everybody there. We like to think so. And, you've got the synergies with the businesses once you're in the system and you're working, and we introduce you to other franchises in your area, et cetera. But right from day one, when you come to our Meet the Team Day, our Discovery Day, we just invested an incredible amount of money in a brand new building up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And we've got a phenomenal showroom up there. And when you walk into this, 20,000 square foot showroom, you're going to see every single brand is represented by their van, their truck, the dumpsters, the bins, the parts, the equipment you get when it's all right there in this huge showroom. And it's you come in there and maybe you weren't 100%, you came in at 80%, right? And you're still kind of working things out in your own mind, and you get in there and you look around and you're like, wow, look at all this.
This is the support that I've got behind me in this.
Yes, it helps cement the message that this is your family of brands, right? And this is what this can do for you. And, in a few cases, people are like, tell me about that, because that seems like really attractive, and we don't, our developers and sales folks, they are by brand. So
Okay.
when you're inquiring with us, it's not, hey, this is Belfor Franchise Group. We've got 15 brands. Which one are you interested? What can I,
Right.
the way we do lead generation, you're typically calling, about a particular brand,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we take them down that path. And, if it starts to kind of go off center, it may be because, they learned some things that maybe the brand did scare them, or it wasn't quite for them, or I didn't understand it. It takes this to do this. Our team is, we'll try to get them back on track. But if it's not, we're not feeling it's for them, we're not going to force that square peg down
Sure.
around hole, right? That's not good for them or us down the path. So,
That's right.
listen, we've got all these other brands here too. Is there anything you see here that maybe appeals to you more, or you're more comfortable with that price range or what have you? So,
Yeah. Well, and territory availability is a big variable in all this, right? So
I didn't even mention that our oldest brand goes back 47 years, and we've got a lot of units out there. Our newest brand goes back about 4.7 months, and we've got wide open availability. So that's a big part of that conversation.
Yeah, which is another interesting dynamic of this, right? You've got all over the board in terms of tenure of the brand, but even with some of these newer brands that you guys have under the umbrella, you still have all the experience, all the resources of Belfor in general backing it. And so if you just look at one emerging concept that's kind of independent on its own versus what's the 4.7 month, is that Junkco Plus, the one that's that new? Yeah. So you look at like a Junkco Plus that's still in its first year. In my eyes, at least, Junkco Plus is a lot less risky than the vast majority of emerging brands because of the backing that they've got from Belfor. I'm curious, how many of your owners own multiple brands, and is that something that you guys are supportive of and would encourage for the right owners at the right times? Is that something that you're starting to see more of as you have owners that are getting further along and maybe their original franchise and the portfolio of brands is kind of expanding? What does that look like?
Yes to all your questions in there. We do have several dozen, I would say, that own more than one concept. You kind of mentioned right time, right situation, right owner. We do look at that.
Sure.
And we don't just say, because you own, a 1-800 water damage, you're automatically qualified to buy Blue Kangaroo pack out. So just sign the paperwork, and we're good to go. We still evaluate our own owners to make sure that they've got the resources and the time. You yourself said, you own two different, concepts. So, you've got to split your time, and, you had one up first and probably got that running a little bit like a well-oiled machine before you took on a second one. We look at that. We even look at, are the brands that do kind of fit together, because if they work really well together, like that example where it's a 1-800 water damage and a Blue Kangaroo pack outs, those could potentially, even a Redbox dumpster, those could be on site for the same job at the same time. You could share employees, right? So there's a lot that you can do with those two that work really well together. And maybe some of the other brands don't fit as well. At least we're going to explore that conversation and say, okay, how do you see this, working? And so we have several dozen that do own multiple concepts. And to your point, that seems to be growing and growing. We just had a very successful Redbox Plus dumpster franchisee buy a Cool Bins franchise. He actually was our first Cool Bins franchise. He already had a lot that's required to store your dumpsters on, right? Come and go from all your inventory dumpsters. That's also something you need for Cool Bins. Well, if you're running a successful dumpster company, you shouldn't have very many dumpsters on your lot at any given point in time, because they should all be out on jobs and landfills and being moved around. So when we shipped you all those dumpsters, you needed an acre, because I had 100 dumpsters, and that takes up a lot of space. Well, maybe I only keep 15 on the lot at any given point in time. So now I got all the 3/4 of an acre with not much going on. Oh, guess what? That'd be great for my Cool Bins operation, because again, I need a lot for those, and I can split the cost between two brands. So there's just a lot of things we look at, and what makes sense for the brands, for the owners, how strong they are in their organizational skills, the obvious, are they able to, manage and do what they're required to do from a franchise standpoint? But, what are their skill sets? Does it work for this brand just the same way it worked for that brand? And
Right.
so we love dual owners, but we got to be careful. I'll be
Yeah,
honest.
there's a lot to factor in, and you need to do it responsibly. I could imagine scenarios where you've got an owner that's had some early success, and they're excited and maybe wanting to be a little bit aggressive, and they're coming to you saying, "Hey, we're ready to look at doing another one," and you're like, "Well, let's just pump the brakes and make sure you're really in the right position." I mean, financial position is so important, because the last thing you'd want is to see someone that's having success in one business overextend themselves to start a second business, and next thing you know, now both businesses are suffering as a result of that. I've seen examples of that in the past, but I think overall the point is, I think for a lot of people that have big goals when it comes to business ownership, this should be enticing, right? Because that opportunity exists. And, like in our case, the two franchises, we've sold the other one since then. So we only own one now, but the two that we owned didn't have shared ownership, which is doable, right? But I imagine there's a lot of benefits to owning two different franchise companies that are part of the same ownership group, and there's synergies beyond just what the businesses do and the customers that they serve, but from back end management, technology, systems, support. And then if you're really thinking forward, exit strategy, if you decide to sell the business, you can sell it off as a package. That's probably advantageous as well. So one of the things I'd love to hear a little bit from you on is some of the support. You already touched on some of this with, franchise business coaches and things like that. But, in all of my experience, the best practices in franchising in terms of how the franchisors can really add the most value to their franchisees and support them are fairly universal, regardless of the industry that you're in. Obviously, it's going to vary some, but what are some of the things that you feel Belfor really excels at when it comes to supporting the franchisees? If you've been considering business ownership, if you're already a business owner looking to expand and you're curious about franchising, I'd love to connect with you, answer any initial questions that you have, talk about a specific franchise, and detail the exact process that I use and have taken hundreds of people through to help them understand franchise ownership, find the right franchise for them, and conduct the necessary due diligence. Click the link in the show notes if you'd like to schedule a free, no obligation strategy call. I look forward to talking with you. And now back to the episode.
So you touched on it earlier. We're continuing to add brands, and that could be just organically or buying, what have you. So they may be a newer brand, like a Junko that you mentioned, that doesn't have any units, right? We just kind of got them off the ground. So, but never will a brand with Belfor Franchise Group just be, this little brand with, think about most franchises start up with 3-4 employees, maybe the founder and a couple of employees, right? Even you mentioned it, when we have a new brand, you've already got 300 employees at Belfor Franchise Group that are there to support that new brand. We've already got built out, the sales team. You've already got built out the onboarding team. You've already got the coaches and trainers in place there. You've already got the marketing team in place. So you've got all these very well developed departments that have, dozens of employees that have all the experience with our brands, multiple brands. That pulls scale too, right? We've got 3,500 franchises across all of our brands. So that, to your point, whether that's software buys, phone service, all the things you need to know, manage your business. Well, a lot of that can be purchased at scale, right? And a lot of those savings can be passed on to our franchisees because of the type of scale that we have. And that can go to uniforms and swag to hand out to your customers or whatever it is, right? We can, work with, and again, it's not just Belfor Franchise Group. Beyond that, we've got Belfor with, not that they're working in our business day to day, but that scale again with,
The
11,
buying powers.
12,000. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Fleet programs for vehicles. We're buying
Yeah. It's
hundreds and
huge.
hundreds of vehicles every year. So
Yeah.
there's a lot that you get, to benefit from when you're part of the organization. So that's one of the things we like to say. You can feel comfort for those of you who like emerging brands or have lots of white space out there, but they're nervous. Oh, it's a new brand. Well, it is, but it isn't when it comes to
Yeah, it's very different. Like we've touched on, from just your kind of standard emerging brand founder has a good business, decides to franchise it, but now they've got to figure out this whole franchising game. And one of the biggest reasons I see new franchise companies not be successful is because the franchisor was undercapitalized. Sounds like that's not a problem that you guys run into. So last kind of thing I'd love to hear from you on, we've already talked about the fact that, across all of your brands, some are going to be a better fit for different people based on their goals, their experience, their skill sets, et cetera. But across the board, like, what are some of the commonalities that you see across the top performing franchise owners with all of these different brands? My guess is that, if you took the top performing franchise owner in each of your 15 brands, they would all have some very strong similarities in terms of how they operate their business. Maybe not necessarily how they're spending their time every single day, but some similarities nonetheless. So what are some of those things that you see as common traits with your top performers?
Two big things. I mean, there's lots, right? But the two biggest things we probably look at, and I would say is common amongst all of those, sales and marketing skills. And I want to expand on that in a second, right?
Yep.
And the ability to know your numbers. You don't need to be a CPA, but our most successful franchisees, if you ask them the KPIs, just in a passing, because you ran into them for lunch and you asked them, what kind of revenue they're doing this month, what's their average check size, what's their labor, whatever those KPIs are in the brand, they typically know them like that because they manage their business and they're in touch with it and they can react quickly when they see something out of line. So knowing your numbers, again, you don't need to be a CPA. I'm not talking tax efficiency, whatever. I'm just saying knowing your KPIs, knowing your numbers.
Yeah.
And then the sales marketing piece, I don't mean you necessarily had to come from a sales and marketing job.
Right.
But those people are not afraid to go out and make contacts in the community. They're going to go out and start having conversations. They're going to get into the networking groups and the chambers and the BNIs. But they're also they're going to be, we're home services. All these brands at some point in time put you in somebody's living room,
Mm-hmm.
right? Somebody's office. So you've got to be able at least to have a conversation that you're not uncomfortable having, And the other thing is a lot of our businesses, because they have that kind of restoration core, you need to be at your best because your customer right now is at their worst. So you're coming in and you've got to be empathetic. So when I say sales and marketing, I also mean that to include, communication skills, empathy, genuine feelings about your customers. I mentioned customer service, how important it is. A lot of our businesses surround themselves with people who are in a really bad spot right now. Their house just burned down. They lost everything they have. Their kids are screaming and crying because their toys are floating down the street. I mean, it can be really ugly, and you've got to be able to put yourself in those shoes and then figure out how to do your business without making them any more uncomfortable than they already are. So it's just that personal skill that we look for, and those are the two big
good
things.
People skills. It sounds like, and the sales and marketing piece. It's almost not like what most people would traditionally think of when you say sales and marketing. It's ability to just get out there in the community, talk to anyone and everyone that could potentially be in a position to refer someone to you at some point. Make sure people know who you are, what you do, and who you help. And I think that's common across, especially any of these service-based businesses. The most successful owners, they understand the importance of that. I know, in our businesses, it's the type of thing that you have to stick at it for a while before you really start to see the consistent results from it. I think, some business owners, they go do it, a couple days a week for a couple of weeks, and they're not, getting a ton of leads from these networking and these relationship development efforts. And they just kind of uh, take their foot off the gas with it. It's just got to be a consistent part of your activities, and over time it all kind of snowballs, and it will pay dividends down the road. But there's not as much of that instant gratification as, if you can just increase your pay-per-click budget by $1,000 a month, and the phone starts ringing more.
We always tell our people, not to expect. We try to discourage you thinking you're replacing your paycheck in a lot of cases, right? Seamlessly right from day one, right? It's any small business.
Yeah.
It's going to take a year or two to get it up and running. And
Yeah.
like the thing is, you're building a house, right? And you've got cinder blocks foundation, and you just mentioned it, right? All the things we've already talked about are on one each their own cinder block, and then the sponsoring the little league team and having banners, sponsorship at this kid's elementary school, and putting out flyers and getting involved with Habitat for Humanity, and toys for tots at Christmas. All those things are, each one of those is one of 150, cinder blocks that you're using to build that foundation. And to your point, you just need to keep building on that, and it will take care of itself.
Well, and the thing that's cool with that and these types of businesses, because every now and then I hear someone that would say something along the lines of, Wes, I just don't think I want to own a franchise because I feel like I'm more entrepreneurial than that. And I don't want to be too confined in, how I have to operate my business. And, there are some franchises out there, like, if you own a McDonald's, there's only so much variation you're going to be able to do as a McDonald's franchisee. Like, they've got a pretty tight playbook that you run. But in these types of businesses, look at all those examples you just gave in terms of how franchisees can go out and get involved in their community and, start to really build on those networking efforts. So these are the types of franchises where, as an owner, you really do have the ability to, think outside of the box, be a little more creative, put your own touch or your own style to the business. And, there's still a playbook, there's still systems and processes, and you're going to be successful if you follow the system. But within that, there's a little more room for creativity and personal touch. And I think that's appealing to a lot of people.
I think it's absolutely appealing. One of the things we often have to share with people who aren't experienced in the franchise world, they're just looking for a business, is to explain to them, this is a business. This is your business. It's not ours. You're not an employee. It is you're an entrepreneur. This is your business. We are the guide, the guardrails for your business. And we've done a lot of that grunt work on the front side that you can just implement versus having to create it from scratch. But it is your business. Don't let anybody tell you you are not an entrepreneur because you own a franchise. It is 100% your business.
That's exactly right. I've kind of come to look at it as, if you plug into a good franchise as the way to start your business, it just gives you the ability to run faster, right? You're going to be able to actually get to work building the business a lot quicker because everything you need in place to actually operate the business is going to be essentially there for you, versus having to spend so much time and money to figure out, all right, I need a CRM system. Do we need someone to answer the phones? How are we going to do our marketing? Even coming up with the branding and the logos and things like that. The list goes on and on. But Doug, man, there's so much that we could dive into with this. I think, hopefully this gave people a good at least basic understanding of what you guys have built and continue to build there at the Belfor Franchise Group. You and I talked a little offline. We'll work on getting some of the brand presidents or a representative from each of the franchise brands under the umbrella, so we can do a deeper dive on.
Yeah, I'd love to get dirty. Talk about some dirty jobs, some boring jobs, some great jobs. So
well, the people that listen to this show regularly, they know that these are my favorite types of businesses to talk about. I kind of came up through home service franchising, and it's the type of franchises that we've owned. And for me, it's a lot of fun just to kind of educate people on why these types of businesses can be so appealing, because sure, you've seen it like I have. A lot of people would be real quick to dismiss some of these types of dirtier, less sexy businesses, because they just don't understand some of the basic, fundamentals of why these businesses can be so lucrative, and why they can be, attractive for a lot of people from all types of backgrounds, once they understand some of those basic fundamentals. So, Doug, really appreciate you coming on. I know you're very busy. So thank you for spending some time with us. Where could people connect with you? Where could people learn more about Belfor and all the different franchises that are part of Belfor?
The easiest way would be go to belforfranchisegroup.com. All the information for every one of our brands is on there. Lots of great video content, lots of backstories and things like that. So belforfranchisegroup.com. And, if you're further interested in going a little bit further down the road, just click on through it and you'll get right to us. And we'll be more than happy to help you out.
Beautiful. All right. Doug Smith, Belfor Franchise Group. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here on the Path to Freedom podcast.
All right, Wes. Really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to talking again.
Yes, sir.